You're listening to Honestly Aging by Friends Life Care VigR, a podcast where we explore what it's like getting older, the peaks, the valleys, and everything in between. In this season of Honestly Aging by Friends Life Care VigR, we're covering topics related to vibrant aging. I'm your host, Cheryl Praska. Let's grow old together. On today's episode, I'm joined by George Salloom, a retired social worker, dedicated volunteer, and active member of Old Haverford Friends Meeting. Throughout his career in social work, George supported hospice, long-term care, and hospital communities. His volunteer work, particularly in facilitating bereavement support groups for over 30 years, has given him profound insight into grief, loss, and their spiritual dimensions. As a clerk in the Quaker community, he values deep listening and thoughtful dialogue, fostering meaningful connections in both his work and faith. George, welcome. It is such a pleasure to have you. How are you today?
I'm fine. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. George, you're here to talk about grief and the insights that you've gained from over 30 years of bereavement support work. To get us started, can you share a bit about your background and what led you to bereavement support?
Okay. Well, I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area. I went to graduate school at Howard University, got my master's degree in social work. And my wife and I moved here to the Philadelphia area. And my work experience has mostly been in the healthcare field. I worked in hospitals as a social worker, long-term care as a social worker and an administrator, and I also worked in hospice for a number of years. What I do now after retirement, and I've been doing even while I was working, is to facilitate a support group for people who are experiencing the loss of a loved one. Um, and that's kind of how I got here. Many different paths I've had over the years, many different work experiences, but I just felt very strongly about the population I worked with that there was so much pain and suffering from losses that they experienced um, through health issues, deaths of family members, and other losses that they experienced. That this is what was a field I felt very comfortable in and wanted to do more work in that area.
After 30 years, I have to imagine you have tried a lot of different approaches and over the years just continuing to hone your skill in this area. And I'd be really interested to hear more about like what is your approach to supporting those who are grieving?
Well, you're right. It has changed over the years. When I first started out, I considered myself a fixer. I was going to take care of these folks and they were going to be okay. And I realized very quickly that that's not the case. So I try to, with my groups that I have, I try to create an atmosphere where they feel comfortable, uh, that they're coming into a space that uh, they will be protected. Um, there will be, especially their confidentiality, a place where they can share whatever they're feeling about their loss and feel supported as they do that expression. And it seems to work, especially in a group, because people come there and they may not know each other for the most part. So it's kind of a strange situation for them, but they have the courage to come and see if this experience would be helpful for them. And it turns out that it does work. And for the most part, they do most of the talking. Like I say, I just create the atmosphere for them. I explain to them that this is their group. So If they want it to work for them, they have to put the work in and the effort, and also to be supportive of one another in this experience. They shouldn't be judgmental of one another. They can certainly ask questions of each other, but it's really about them learning more about themselves through the interaction with other people who are grieving.
I identify as a fixer, where if there's a problem, I just want to come in and fix it. And I really struggle with being able to take that step back and like more so taking that facilitator role or being the container to help someone like solve their own problem or get through something difficult and kind of like sitting in that silence and in that space to let that person work through it. How are you able to, like, kind of elevate yourself and move beyond that fixer role? Because I have a sneaking suspicion that there are also some listeners out there who can also identify as a fixer.
Yeah. Well, like I say, my experience, I've been an administrator in long-term care facilities. So when problems come up, they have to be fixed. But this is totally different, what I'm doing. And I also realize that it's going to take a long time beyond the 8-week program I have for any fixing or transformation to take place. So it makes helps me to be more relaxed. Just having the people there and talking with one another is really all I'm really looking for initially, and like it's their journey, it's not my journey. And it's their ability to um, verbalize how they're feeling. Uh, if they cry, that's okay. Oftentimes they apologize. I say that you don't have to apologize for being yourself. And like I say, the transformation that takes place for the people who stick it out for the 8 weeks, I see change taking place. They come in very serious, sad, but midway through, they start laughing with each other. They learn more about each other's backgrounds. It's not just focused on their loss, although that is why they're there. And so it seems to work, and there's a power beyond me that's making it work for them.
And what comes up for me is perhaps your program helps kickstart the healing process. And my understanding is that in your 8-week group, you take an approach that incorporates meditation, music, deep listening. I'm sure there are other facets of your support group that are also part of this healing process. And I would just love to hear about the role that all those different aspects play in someone's healing process.
Well, all those things you mentioned are true. I start out each session with a meditation that I picked up many years ago, and it's very helpful for them to kind of it's talks about remembering those who have passed, and uh, we share that together. They can mention names of those who they have lost with that meditation. Even before that, I try to provide an atmosphere again of let's be silent for a few minutes. Let's try to get all the clutter in our mind away, pushed away for these few minutes we're going to be together, and listen to your body, listen to your breathing, and just kind of get relaxed and centered. For some people, that's easy to do. Others, it's difficult, but it's the practice that I offer to them in the group. I also encourage them to do their own meditation outside of the group. Some people have no idea what meditation is, so it requires some explanation, practices that they can find. There's so many practices out there that, you should be able to find something that works for you. And it can be things like, going for walks, seeing the changes in the natural world that take place, seasonal changes, which may help to connect for them the idea of things dying and renewal, and new life coming. Um, I give out a lot of handouts that I've collected over the years, for them to look at. I suggest they go online if they're looking for more information. There's a lot out there online about the bereavement and loss. And and you mentioned music too. For one of my sessions, I bring in a music therapist who has worked in hospice, and she's very good in helping the people uh, understand that music can be very helpful for them. And people do talk about songs that they have shared with their loved ones that they remember and play, and it kind of helps them uh, to reconnect with their loved one. Also, I think there's a rhythm in our life that we go along for a while, and it's disrupted by a death of a loved one. The rhythm is no longer there, and it takes for some people a long time to bring that rhythm back into their life, and music can help with that also. Um, I do ask a lot of questions, as I said. Sometimes I might have a particular theme I want to focus on. Maybe be anger. Have they had issues of anger since their loved one has died? Maybe sadness, how they're expressing sadness. Are they comfortable talking with other people about their losses? What do they foresee happening to them as they move forward in their life? So, again, it's all open-end questions that I offer to them, and hopefully they can respond. They may get into exchanges with other people in the group, which is good. They go back and forth with questions. So it's a very dynamic experience, um, and something that I really can't control completely because it happens. It's spontaneous.
This question's a little bit off the cuff. It's coming up for me when you talk about some of these like feelings that people need to work through with grief, such as like anger, sadness, and that makes me think of what I've heard as the stages of grief. Is that something that you're like, seeing, like, people working through these stages of grief? That I feel like that's put out there a lot by, people in this field of grief and loss and bereavement.
Well, that's interesting coming up because that you brought up because people do hear about stages of grief. However, it really doesn't work that way.
Okay.
And I think it's the culture that we have, like the fixing that we talked about earlier. Okay, well, if I go through these stages, I'm okay. Everything will be okay. It does not work that way. And a lot of that comes from Dr. Kubler-Ross, who talked about the stages of grieving, but actually her initial study was about people who were dying, not about people who were grieving. And even after developing this for many years, during the last year of her life, when she was struggling and ill and experienced a lot of pain, she said, there's no stages to this. It's what happens. Some people may be angry at one point and remain angry until they die. They may have an overwhelming fear of death, and that may stick with them. So the stages that she talked about, she really kind of said this really isn't the case. It's things happen in a cycle, where you can feel very strongly at one point about um, some aspect in your life or some feeling that's very strong, and that may go away, and it may come back later on. Many years after you're grieving. So I try to stay away from talking about stages and more about the feelings that occur that they
Mhm.
may experience as they as their life transforms into a new reality for them, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, and it makes me think about my grandfather. He is the person that I've been closest to who I've lost, and I lost him as an adult, so I had many years with him, and he was a very big Philadelphia sports fan. So whenever a Philadelphia sports team is doing very well, I feel myself going through some of those grief feelings where on the one hand, I'm like, "Oh my goodness, my pop-up would have loved to have been here to experience this." Then on the other hand, he's not here, so I don't get to experience this with him. So it's, I hear what you're saying about having all those feelings come up at different stages, and it's a cycle, and he's been gone for many years now, but I still have these events that trigger these feelings to come up for me again.
Yeah. And they may come up and they may not be as strong as they were initially, and that's a good sign, that you're still not impacted so strongly by the feelings that the loss brings to you. But it's okay to have those feelings. I mean, I still get emotional when I think about my father, in his death, and that's been like 39 years ago. So
Mhm.
I think it's just part of the human condition that we have and the memories that we carry. And I think it's a good thing, to remind us that he was an important part of my life, and and I still have strong feelings. I still have a relationship with him. And the relationship I have now with him is different than when he was alive. So I can take comfort in that also.
That is really beautiful to think about, the memories that we carry, and that even when someone is gone, we still have a relationship with that person. And that is something to for me that I'm going to like hold close to my heart. So that's really just some like sage words that I appreciate and I will put into practice when I think of him. I do want to touch back about you mentioning bringing in a music therapist into your bereavement support group. So, in addition to yourself, the music therapist, of course, the participants of the support group, who else might you involve in your grief support group work and why?
I just recently started inviting a retired hospice chaplain to come in, and his experiences are something that um, I did not have. I mean, he saw many people die, was with them and the family, so he has experience both with the dying and those who are bereaved. And wrote a book, which is full of poems he wrote and stories about people that he um, worked with as a chaplain. Um, and the spirituality is a tough issue to bring up with people because people are not always in touch with their spiritual life, and you may have been raised in a certain faith community, and these were what you were told as a child is going to happen to you when you die, or what you need to do before you die. And people hold on to those for most of their life, and that's all they carry with them. They really don't take time to examine their spiritual life and and go deep, as I like to say. And he brought that home, or has brought that home to people, that a death not only impacts us psychologically, but it also impacts us spiritually. And we have to take that into account. And this, for some people, can be, a real new area of thought that they never considered before. And some of the meditations that people can do, or even journaling, or reading, some spiritual literature can help with that. And I find myself, this is very helpful, and it helped me over time to see how my spiritual life was impacted by the death of people close to me, and the connecting I was talking about, with my father. All those are things that can be helpful, not only we never get over our grief. It's kind of an open-ended thing. There's never an ending to it, but it can help to better understand how the loss impacted my life, how it um, may be responsible for the changes and decisions I made going forward, and how, again, spiritually has this helped me in some way to be able to look within myself at my real self and say, okay, George, what's happening right now? And where are you? What's your connection, not only with the people who are around me, but also the people that are no longer here?
And just want to give the invitation to listeners that you are all welcome to evolve in spirituality. Where I remember going to learn about the faith that my family believed in, and it's really like delivered that this is the way it is. And as I've gotten older, my thoughts and feelings around faith and spirituality have evolved, and that was difficult at first for me to cope with. So I imagine someone who's even, further in their aging journey, having thought one way that maybe was dictated to them, it can be tough to have that reflection on their own personal thoughts and feelings about spirituality and faith. However, I think it would be a beneficial practice for many people.
Yeah, we have rituals and practices that we grew up with, and they certainly are important. And I don't want to minimize those, because people do take solace in the rituals that they attend. Um, but for me, and I can only talk about myself, I felt like I needed to get beyond the
Mhm.
rituals, the dogmas, and see investigate even more deeply. And again, I think the losses that I have experienced in the past have helped me to make that transition to and not that I'm doing away with the practices and the rituals and so forth, but there's more to life than that. And it's unfortunate that many religions don't encourage that kind of exploration for people. And because it's okay, and it doesn't mean you're giving up anything. If anything, you're broadening your thinking, and it can be very helpful.
Would you prefer to age independently in your own home or live in a nursing facility? I know what I'd rather do. Friends Life Care membership offers just that. Plan today for a future lived at home with vitality, independence, growth, and resilience while protecting your savings. Learn about your options at a free seminar or webinar. Register at friendslifecare.org/register or call 215-628-8964. Welcome back to Honestly Aging by Friends Life Care VigR, where today I'm joined by George Salloom to talk about grief and what he's learned in his 30 years of bereavement support work. In your bereavement support group, we talked about that it lasts for 8 weeks and you incorporate a variety of different methods in it. Is there anything else that you want to add to what we've talked about so far about what participants could expect?
I guess what I've already said, they can expect to be in an environment that's safe, where they can share what they would like to say. Um, some folks are very guarded. They might not say a whole lot at the beginning, but maybe over time, they will. Um, and the 8 weeks is not the end of a treatment. It's
Mhm.
only the beginning. for a lot of people, and they have to find a way to renew their life in some way. They've lived in a universe, very comfortable universe with perhaps a loved one, and that person dies or their universe shatters, and now they have a choice. They can try to stay in that old universe, or they can step out into something that's can be very frightening and challenging for them. So it's a difficult decision to make, going forward. Um, and I hope that when they leave, that they understand that there is support for them in continuing that journey. I have people coming back. You know, it's not a one-off for them. They come back for additional 8-week sessions, and I can see between the times, the last time they were there and the next group, that they have made some strong decisions in their life for the better. That doesn't mean they're over their grief. They never get over their grief, but the grief has they have expanded around their grief. A lot of people don't do that. The grief expands them,
Mm.
but we have to expand ourselves around our grief in some way, and it's just a continuing growth process. Your faith journey is until you die, and beyond that. So um, that's kind of, as I said earlier, I'm not a fixer. I don't expect people to say, okay, I'm cured, I'm ready, I'm over my grief. No, it's just the beginning of a long journey that they're going to experience, and they're going to have their ups and downs. There's going to be those swells in their life, of the grief feelings, but those swells are further apart than they were at the beginning.
What are some of the benefits that you see in a group setting, a group support setting, as compared to a one-on-one support setting?
Some people need individual therapy uh, because they may have already had some psychological issues before the death. They may have a depression that they have never dealt with, and the death may cause that depression to become even more difficult for them to handle. So I think individual counseling for many different reasons and group can really work in tandem with each other, where they have an opportunity to talk with other people besides their therapist about what they're experiencing. People who would be considered, non-medical, and so if I see, and I always put this out to people, if you feel like you need more help than what you're getting out of the group, I can give you resources you can check out, and see if that would be helpful. I mean, that was my own experience. I mean, after my father died, I really went down, into a deep depression, and I was struggling. I mean, and I could see how it was impacting my family in particular, and my work. So I found a therapist that was very helpful for me, and helped me to kind of see where things lie, what I was dealing with internally, questions that I had about the relationship with my father that were never resolved. And you can do that in individual therapy, maybe not, can't always do that in a group. So again, it really depends on the individual. um, but individual therapy can be a good thing if you find the right therapist to help you.
Within your support group, what are some of the transformations that you've been able to see in participants throughout the course of the program, and people who have come a couple of times, have continued to come through the program?
Mhm. uh, the people who come back seem to be in a position where they can be more supportive and compassionate with the newcomers, which is really important. Um, and and I see growth in them because they talk more about um, new challenges they've had, and how things are working better for them, or maybe not working better at all. But they're more open and verbal about what they're experiencing, and I think it's good for the first timers who come to see that, that they can see, okay, here was somebody that was in this group, a similar group in the past, and now they seem to be in a different place than they were before. So that's helpful for me to know that they have gotten something out of the group experience, and they're not finished with their grieving, and they will say, I will always grieve, my wife loss, but I'm learning to live with that loss, and it's not holding me back from um, challenges that I'm facing now in my life. So those are the kind of transformations that I see. I mean, in terms of the 8 weeks, so I see people becoming a little more relaxed.
Mm.
They seem to connect with others um, in a very personal way. They are more open, about their feelings, and they don't seem to want to stop the group. In fact, I've had feedback from groups I've had in the past that a large contingent of them continue to get together on their own, which is great, because they feel that need to be in contact with each other and get the support that they were getting during the group.
Why are you so passionate about this work, George?
Well, I I don't know. I mean, it's. I wish I could answer that. I just think it's a gift that has been given to me, and I nurture that gift, and I it's a mystery to me how I got it, but I use it, because I think I have been created to work to provide that gift, and offer that gift to others, and I'm very. I feel very humbled when I say that, because it's not something that I got out of a textbook or something, or somebody told me. It was something, although I have gotten good feedback, from people who tell me that being in the group has been very helpful for me. So I know that offering that environment can be very helpful for people because of the feedback I get. I get very, very little negative feedback about their experience. So, and it offers me an opportunity to offer compassion, because I think that's another gift that has been given to me, and I feel very comfortable offering that to others. So again, they're gifts that have been given to me, and because they're gifts, I take good care of them, and nurture them, um, and whenever I see people smiling and laughing at the end of the 8 weeks, or even during that time, I feel like, the gifts I have been given are working. And I know that these folks have gifts too that perhaps they're not fully aware of at this point, because of the grief that they're working through, and but they will discover their griefs, and that's what keeps faith communities, other communities together. We share our gifts with one another, and we identify, and we give notice to people, about their own gifts that they may not see it themselves, and the group does that. They identify what's been helpful from, not from me, but from other people in the group. So it's just being together and being open and honest and not being judgmental, asking questions, looking for clarification. All those things are important in terms of the growth of the group and of the individuals in the group.
And what I have found is that sometimes our own personal gifts can be so intrinsic to us that we don't see them as gifts. We just see that as part of how we are, how we show up in life. Yet other people can see them like, oh my goodness, I love how you bring some whatever it might be to this group or to this family or to this work that we're all doing collectively. So please share with people when you see one of their gifts shining through. It will always feel good to let them know about it, and then perhaps they can start identifying it and incorporating it in to have that positive effect on others, just like you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it is. I mean, like you say, not only be aware of our own gifts, but what you see in other people. That's very important. And I think that will happen, for people who are grieving, because as they become more aware of themselves and, the gifts that they have, they seem to be more aware of other people's gifts also. So that's all part of the healing process that they're experiencing.
We have focused this conversation talking about grief. And at least for me, I can get confused about like what is grief and what is mourning. So
Mhm.
can you explain the difference for our listeners, the difference between grief and mourning?
Sure. We all grieve, over a loss that we've had. I mean, there's other losses besides death that people grieve about. It can be when you were a kid, your family moved to a different neighborhood and you feel sad because you're going to miss your friends or your school. So there are many losses that we experience throughout our life. The a dog or pet may die. So um, or you break up with your boyfriend or girlfriend. I mean, those are all losses that are. Our life is full of losses. We grieve those losses. We feel sad. We feel hurt. We feel angry, and the but we don't externalize those feelings, those grief feelings. That's what mourning is. That's the externalization of the feelings in some way. Uh, it and people do that in different ways. We cry, we tell how we're feeling, we may journal about what we're feeling, we may uh, play a musical instrument. All these are ways that can help externalize what we're feeling inside. The problem becomes is when people shut down, they don't, they may have those feelings, they may know they have 'em, but they try to push them down and not externalize them in some way. And, uh, and by doing that, they really hurt themselves and also the people around them. That happened to me, when I lost my father. I kept all those very difficult feelings with inside myself until I could see, but this is really not a good thing. I'm depressed. My family doesn't know what's going on, and it can be very hurtful and destructive. So that's the grieving part, and that's the mourning. It's just taking those feelings, those grief feelings, and externalizing them in some way, in a healthy way, not in a destructive way. And again, that's what a group can provide, a place where you can externalize what those grief feelings in a safe environment, in a supportive environment.
You just talked about loss coming in many forms, and a few that I'm aware of are personal loss, communal loss, and ambiguous loss. Can you expand on these different types?
Yes, the personal loss is, of course, when someone close to us dies, or it can be like the losses I said earlier about, moving from one neighborhood to another, losing a pet, changing schools. Those are very personal losses that people experience, and they happen all the time. The communal loss is when an entire community is impacted by some event. Um, it could be like an earthquake, you know, and people die, and the survivors, are all grieving for the loss of the people who have gone. Um, the A school shooting can be similar to that. Um, what's happening right now in our country, I mean, there are people who are really grieving the fear of losing their rights and their democracy. And some of the rallies that you see in the streets, I think, are a way of people are grieving these anticipated losses. So that's kind of the community loss. The ambiguous losses are happen to individuals, but it can be, for example, a a spouse who develops dementia, and the caregiver is losing that relationship that they've had for years with that person. It's not the same person anymore, and they'll tell you that. Um, and they're having all these feelings. They're angry, they're fearful, they're sad, and again, those are grief feelings that need to be externalized in some way. Otherwise, they may take out whatever they're feeling against the person who has the dementia. And those are the caregivers. I mean, they are a very special group of people who really need a lot of support, who need opportunities where they can share their feelings with one another and and don't feel like they're they're unusual, or they're alone. That these feelings are very normal, so it helps to normalize those feelings with any type of group. But that can be helpful too. So, or it could be a when a couple break up and there are children involved, and the child and the whoever whichever parent leaves, that child may never see again. That's kind of an ambiguous loss. That person is still alive, but it's still a loss for them, just like the person with dementia, who's still there, but really not there in many ways.
And recently, you've been doing some reflection on that type of grief that comes with caring for someone with dementia. Can you share any more about that topic with us?
Yeah, well, as I said, I think it's important for folks like that who are the caregivers to get support, and maybe even, and I think there are programs out there for caregivers, but specifically for caregivers of a loved one who has dementia, and that could be a spouse or an adult child. I think you had somebody on your program recently who was an adult child of a parent who had dementia, or had to be placed in a facility because they couldn't be left alone. So those folks are oftentimes forgotten, and they need support. They need to be able to have an opportunity to come together for uh, for that support, to mourn their whatever feelings they are having, and it's not going to resolve their situation, but at least they know that there's a place where they can get some support and help and normalize what they're feeling, what they're going through. So that, I've been thinking about that, um, and how I do that. I'm still kind of working on, and like I say, I know there are groups out there for caregivers, but oftentimes it may be caregivers for someone who has a physical problem, and not so much a mental issue like dementia.
My one grandmother had dementia, and it's very difficult, even as a grandchild, to watch someone really slip away before your eyes. And when I would go visit her, it was difficult emotionally. And at that, I mean, this was many years ago at this point, but at that time, I more so was like, okay, I will go. I will spend time with her, and as a duty, and as someone who I loved and cared for. And quite honestly, I never thought about the emotional toll that it was taking on myself and my family members. And there were some people in the family who would not go and visit with her because it was so difficult for them. So just putting out there into the world that yes, you need to take some emotional care of yourself as a caregiver for someone with dementia. And just thinking about me experiencing it as a visitor, I can only imagine how heightened those types of feelings would be for someone day in, day out as a spouse or a direct child of someone that they must be experiencing.
Yeah. It's an opportunity also for people who want to help. Like in hospice, I've visited folks who were end stage dementia. So I would go, for a couple hours just to give the caregiver a break,
Mhm.
which they really appreciated, to be able to leave that situation and just take some little time for themselves because they are like on 24 hours a day, um, so, people who are looking for ways to help people like that, that's one way they can be involved is through hospice programs that where you can provide that support. I mean, the person who had dementia, um, I could not have a relationship with them, but I could have a strong supportive relationship with the caregiver, and they look forward to the volunteers who come in because they it's not only gives them a break, but also gives them someone to talk to about what they're going through. So that can be very helpful.
George, where can listeners go to learn more about you and your 8-week bereavement support group?
Well, right now they can email me. My email address is my name, George Salloom at hotmail.com. I'm one of the few people that still has a Hotmail.
Well, thank you so much. And this really has been a powerful conversation. And I have some journaling points myself to take away. And I just really appreciate you normalizing this experience that we're all going to go through throughout our lives. And I just really appreciate the conversation and the 30 years of dedicated work that you have done to helping others. And also today, helping us remind listeners of the program that they are not alone. And there are many ways that they can get help and support throughout their grieving process.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
If you are a Friends Life Care member, your care coordinator can connect you with grief support. And for everyone, I've included additional resources in the show notes. Thank you for listening to Honestly Aging by Friends Life Care VigR, a unique program focused on aging with vitality, independence, growth, and resilience. You can find links and show notes from this episode on our website at friendslifecare.org/podcast. Thank you to George Salloom for joining us today. If you like our show, I invite you to please rate, review, subscribe, and join us next time. To learn more about aging with vitality, independence, growth, and resilience, subscribe to our blog at friendslifecare.org/blog.